Bernadette Atuahene.
You guys, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I need a little bit more than that. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mama. You guys are so beautiful. It is such a privilege and honor to be here. I want to tell you a bit about my background and how I came to do this work. So my parents immigrated to America from Ghana, West Africa. And when I was a child, I knew I had 4 career options and 4 career options only. I could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a disgrace to the entire family. I was bad at math, so engineering was a no-go. The thought of dissecting cadavers still makes me want to barf till this day, so that was not an option. Since I was determined not to be a disgrace, law was really the only option left. So I didn't want to be any old lawyer. When I enrolled at UCLA for my undergraduate education, I knew I wanted to be a change maker protecting intergenerational wealth in my community. And y'all, when I commit to something, I am all in. I worked myself to the bone and made it to Yale Law School and Harvard's Kennedy School of Government to complete my graduate studies. I eventually became a law professor, and now I am proud to say 100% of my research, my activism, and my writing deals with land stolen from Black people. So I do something called ethnography, and that is basically when you immerse yourself in the place you study. And my first ethnographic project was really studying land stolen in South Africa during apartheid and colonialism. In my first book, it was called We Want What's Ours, Learning from South Africa's Land Restitution Project. I really examined the political, psychological, social, economic impact of getting land or money back. The book was a huge success. At the official book launch in Johannesburg, the Deputy Land Claims Commissioner himself attended and publicly announced that the commission would be implementing 90% of my book's recommendations. So now, although that first book project was wildly successful, it was really uncomfortable for me in many ways because it was looking at Black people as the victims, Black people being stolen from. So I decided in my next ethnographic project, I wanted to look at Black people doing the stealing instead of being stolen from. So I decided I wanted to study squatting, which is, again, when vulnerable populations are taking property instead of being stolen from. Now, Detroit has one of the largest squatting populations in recent US history, so that's how I actually got to Detroit. I won a National Science Foundation grant to come and study squatting in Detroit. Now, in the law, there are 2 kinds of squatters. One is called a takeover. That's when people roll into a piece of property with no prior legal relationship to that property. But there's also, I teach first-year property law, and I teach my students about another category called holdovers. And those are people who once had a relationship to the property, but they somehow fell out of it. So when I was interviewing the holdovers, one person after the next said they were once the owner of the property, they got tax foreclosed, and then they stayed waiting for the new owner to arrive. Now at that point, as a property law professor, I knew a lot about mortgage foreclosure, but I knew very little about property tax foreclosure. So I had to really start doing my homework, and I soon found that since 2009, 1 in 3 homes has completed the property tax foreclosure process in Detroit. 1 in 3, let me let that sink in. We haven't seen this number of property tax foreclosures in American history since the Great Depression. So given the gravity of the situation, I called the NSF, who gave me the grant to come and study squatting in Detroit, and told them, hey guys, I found something else. I got to put the squatting project aside. They gave me their blessing. And since 2007, I've lived on the east side of Detroit, really trying to understand the property tax foreclosure crisis from those I live beside. Now, when you all read the book, you're going to find out about a character. Her name is Myrisha Brown. She's one of almost 150 homeowners who I interviewed for my study. Now, Marisha is this petite brown-skinned sister with this super cute pixie cut. And hers, again, is one of the many stories I tell in my book, Plundered. So there was one cold winter day when Marisha and I returned to the home that she had lost through property tax foreclosure. And as we approached the home, she was like, man, Professor, I haven't been back here since my kids and I were evicted some years back. And as we approached the house, we noticed that the house was empty. And you all, for Marisha, that was a complete and total gut punch, because she had worked so hard to make sure that her house did not become an abandoned structure like so many of the homes in Detroit and so many of the homes on her block. So as we kept walking, she really started pointing out all the various places she had told me about during the many years that we had been conducting interviews. She said, Professor, this right here, that's the garage that burned down when there was a fire next door. She said, Professor, this right here, here's where my granddad's apple tree used to be. When he died, it died. And as we kept walking around the house, checking out the property, she comes to the side window, which is where her grandmother, who lived to age 102, used to live. So the side window peeked into the living room, which is where her grandmother spent her last days. And when I saw Marisha's face go ashen, I ran over to her quickly to figure out what in the world was going on. What was she looking at? And when I stood next to her to look through that window, I'm going to tell you, we both could not believe our eyes. The pipes had burst, covering the living room in at least a foot of ice. Marisha just started wailing, and all I could do was stand next to her and hold her tight and cry with her. Now, what we need to know is this home on Baylor Street meant so much to Marisha because her grandparents fought hell and high water to acquire it. Despite racial covenants, redlining, blockbusting, urban renewal, and other racist policies that we'll talk about in a minute, in their retirement, Marisha's grandparents were finally able to purchase this home, and it was without a doubt their dream home. And it was in fact located in an area that racial covenants once made off limits to black people, but when white people moved to the suburbs, black people moved in. Now, this home on Baylor Street was the only asset that Marisha's grandparents had to pass down. But by the time that Marisha's grandmother passed away, I told you she lived to the ripe old age of 102, nobody even wanted the home because it was no longer a valuable asset. It was in fact a money pit. The home had broken windows covered with plastic to keep the elements out. There was no functioning shower or bath. There was plaster falling from the ceilings, and really most of the other homes on the block were in equally bad shape. But what I need you to realize is that when historic and modern day redlining cut off funds for home improvement, this type of blight is the inevitable result. So given the poor shape of the Baylor Street home, the real question is, why in the world was Marisha so dedicated to rehabilitating it when no other family member even wanted anything to do with the home? When I interviewed Marisha for the first time, she shared her life with me and really gave me insight into this quandary. As the eldest child and a woman, she really carried back-breaking caretaking responsibilities on her very narrow shoulders. Marisha told me that not only did she take care of her two children, she also had to care for their father, who was in a wheelchair as a result of a carjacking. She told me she had to care for her sister, who had a debilitating autoimmune disease, along with that sister's child. Marisha also had to care for another of her sisters who had irreversible brain damage, and that sister's young son. Because our nation's poorest social safety net, women like Marisha are really forced to fill the gaps at great cost to themselves. But after spending time with Myrisha, it really became clear to me why she couldn't easily abandon her grandparents' home on Baylor Street. Under no circumstances did Myrisha dodge or evade family responsibilities. No matter how daunting, she took them on head on. And rehabilitating her legacy was not something that Myrisha wanted to do, it's actually something she had to do. Some of Myrisha's most precious childhood memories happened on Baylor Street. She told me, Professor, I remember scooping up the apples that my granddaddy shook down from the apple tree. She said those were some of the juiciest green apples in the whole city of Detroit. Above all, Myrisha is what I call a ride-to-die Detroiter. I don't know if y'all know any of those, right? She rides for her city. She does not play when it comes to the city of Detroit. And she did not want her home to become a vacant eyesore like so many other homes in the city, contributing to the story of the city's demise instead of its revival. That's why that day that we returned to Baylor Street and saw the living room covered in at least a foot of ice, Myrisha felt like a complete and total failure. But what I need you all to realize is that Myrisha failed because individual efforts are no match for broken systems. Everybody, I want us to say that together. Individual efforts are no match for broken systems. Together. Individual efforts are no match for broken systems. The saga started when Myrisha found a yellow bag attached to her porch. It looked just like this yellow bag here on the book cover. When she opened the bag, she found a legal notice informing her that the property tax foreclosure process had begun, and if she did not pay her debt by March 31st of the following year, Wayne County would sell her home at its tax foreclosure auction. When she read that notice, y'all, she was flooded with emotion. She felt scared, she felt anxious, she felt depressed, but most of all, y'all, she felt shame. She was ashamed because the yellow bag announced to the entire neighborhood that she was about to lose her grandparents' home. But what's so crazy is when she looked up, she saw a yellow bag attached to almost every door on her block. So at that moment, she knew something was up. She didn't know quite what was going on, but she knew something was awry. And what's so crazy is that when I first met Myrisha, she blamed herself for losing her legacy. She said to me, well, Professor, the problem clearly is I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. And most other officials that I interviewed explained the property tax foreclosure crisis with these similar, what I call narratives of personal irresponsibility. One official told me, Professor, the problem is Detroiters just don't want to pay their taxes. Another told me the problem is Detroiters buy houses they couldn't afford. And another, Dave Shemansky, I'm gonna name him by name, he's so ridiculous. The former treasurer of Detroit told me, Professor, the problem is that when Detroiters had a choice between paying their taxes and buying a purse, unfortunately they decided to buy the purse. But my research tells a different story. It tells a story not one of personal irresponsibility, but a story of structural injustice. In researching this book, I have interviewed thousands, hundreds of homeowners, government officials, and investors. I've combed through reams and reams of property tax assessment data. You guys, I even took a 9-month course to become a certified Michigan property tax assessor and passed a state exam. So I became a Michigan property tax assessor. I'm telling you, when I'm in, I'm all in. And my comprehensive investigation shows that between 2009 and 2015, in each of these 7 years, anywhere between 53 and 84% of properties the city of Detroit assessed in violation of the Michigan State Constitution, which quite clearly says no property can be assessed at more than 50% of its market value. And it was the lowest valued homes, like Myrisha's home on Baylor Street, that were the most severely affected. In addition to my research, the Detroit News did an expose that discovered the city of Detroit overtaxed its homeowners by at least $600 million. Since 30% of Detroiters live below the poverty line, many homeowners didn't have the money to pay these illegally inflated property taxes. And what's so crazy is that many of these Detroiters weren't even supposed to be paying these property taxes in the first place, because when you live below the poverty line in Michigan, you qualify for something called a poverty tax exemption, right? And so you're not supposed to be paying property taxes at all. But because the city of Detroit put up so many barriers for people to receive this entitlement, we had thousands of people who lost their home due to illegally inflated property taxes that they weren't even supposed to be paying in the first place because they qualified for this entitlement called the property tax exemption. So that's why when Myrisha looked up, she saw yellow bags on almost every home on her block. And what I need you all to realize is that when the government takes a home because of a failure to pay property taxes, it doesn't just take bricks and mortar. It takes intergenerational wealth. It takes priceless memories. Through evictions, people lose so much. They lose family photos, they lose grandmama's quilts, they lose those, the height marks that we etch into the door frames to mark our children's growth. They lose track of longtime neighbors who have become family. When people go through property tax foreclosure, they lose so much. And because most tax foreclosed homes had been inherited and were fully paid off, people blame themselves for losing mama's house, for losing granddaddy's house. The fact is, if they still had a mortgage on the house, the bank would have taken the house before the city came to take the house. So during the interviews that I conducted with tax foreclosed homeowners, I cannot tell you how much shame and self-lambasting that was happening. It was so bad that I couldn't say anything during the interview because it would bias my data, but after I finished the interview, I would hang up and call them back. And I'd be like, you know what, sis? I'd be like, you know what, my brother? You have no reason to feel shame. Systemic injustice was hidden in these very complex property tax calculations. Racist policies had you out here trying to slay a dragon with a butter knife. According to my dear brother, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, racist policies he defines as written and unwritten laws and policies that produce and sustain racial inequity. The way property taxes are administered in Wayne County undoubtedly qualifies. In Wayne County, there are 43 cities and municipalities, 33 of which have a supermajority of white people, 70% or more, and 3 have a supermajority of black people, Detroit, Inkster, and Highland Park. My study shows that the majority black cities are overtaxed and foreclosed on at a far greater rate than the majority white cities. This is racial injustice. But this injustice is not exclusively a Detroit problem. Detroit is really ground zero for a national problem. There was this study that came out by 2 friends of mine, Carlos Avendaño Leon and True Howard, that showed blacks and Latinos pay on average a 10 to 13% higher property tax rate than whites for the same bundle of goods every year. So racialized property tax administration is in fact a nationwide problem that our nation has not yet begun to address. And more importantly, this is really a quintessential example of what, in my book, Plundered, I call predatory governance, which is when the local government intentionally or unintentionally raises public dollars through racist policies. We've seen predatory governance before. We saw it in Ferguson, Missouri. Beyond what happened to our dear brother, Michael Brown, there was an excellent Department of Justice report that showed that the city of Ferguson engaged in unconstitutional policing by unfairly subjecting African Americans to excessive fines and fees. Who benefited financially? Not some corrupt police officer, but the city of Ferguson itself. Predatory governance is what's happening in Detroit and many other cities where their local governments are inflating the property taxes of black and brown homeowners. Who financially benefits? Not some corrupt public official, but the public coffers. So just as Detroit is ground zero for this national problem, Detroit has also been the epicenter of the resistance. And once my research really exposed these structural problems, this information really lifted the shame and allowed homeowners to stop beating themselves up, and it made room for righteous indignation so that the fight back could begin. In 2017, my students and I joined with over a dozen grassroots organizations to form what's called the Coalition for Property Tax Justice, which is a coalition of over, again, a dozen grassroots organizations committed to 3 goals. The first is to stop these illegally inflated property taxes. Number 2 is to stop the ongoing foreclosures until we can make sure people are being foreclosed on for taxes they actually owe instead of illegally inflated property taxes. And third is to provide compensation. By building community power, we have secured several significant wins. We've halted roughly 13,000 tax foreclosures by pressuring the Wayne County Treasurer to put a moratorium on foreclosing on owner-occupied homes from 2020 until 2024. We've helped over 1,000 Detroit homeowners successfully apply for a total of $4.4 million in federal ARPA funds to pay their illegally inflated property tax debt. We have even appealed the illegally inflated property tax assessments for over 1,000 Detroit homeowners completely free of charge. And last but not least, we've already secured $6 million from the city of Detroit for compensation. Most importantly, through something called the Dignity Restoration Project, we're raising $10 million to compensate the hardest hit Detroiters. And those are the Detroiters who lost their homes because of illegally inflated property taxes that they weren't supposed to be paying in the first place because they qualified for the property tax exemption. So, to conclude, I'm glad that I did not become an engineer. I'm glad that I didn't become a doctor. I'm glad that I became a lawyer fighting against the theft of Black homes and fighting to protect our intergenerational wealth and dignity. Both of my parents have gone on to glory, but I know they're smiling down on me because, I've managed not to become a disgrace. More importantly and more seriously, people in Detroit and throughout the country who are filled with shame because they're fighting a losing battle against racist policies, they are not a disgrace either. I'll end there, and what I want to do next is really give you a first-hand view. We're going to play a video to give you a first-hand view of someone who has actually lost their home because of these illegally inflated property taxes in Detroit. Her name is Sonia Bonnet. She's one of our fighters. And go ahead and press play, and we'll give you a chance to hear directly from her.
Foreclosure affected my home. It put a looming tension and doubt in the house. It took our happiness away for a second, a good amount of time. It's so heavy it damaged my health. It broke me a little, but I'm back now, and I'm ready now. This house sold for $3,750. I'm surprised it didn't sell for less. I think that my house is worth between $500 to $1,000. So the assessor says my house is worth $22,000. That is severely incorrect. When you go to buy a house, you look at not just the house, but the things surrounding your house, the neighborhood in general. Everything around us is falling apart. There are abandoned houses all down my block on each side. I need siding on the right side of my house. My roof has holes in it. The sewer system, the plumbing. We have a flood in the basement every time it rains, every time. Being illegally assessed makes me so angry. I knew it was wrong. I did not know it was in the Constitution, Michigan's Constitution, but I knew it wasn't right. Detroit is 80% black. It feels like the same type of injustice that is happening so many other places, whether it be getting pulled over because driving while black, any of those things, it's the same thing, just hidden better. I learned about the poverty tax exemption through hearsay. And I'm like, we have to be eligible for this. But everyone I asked about it at every one of these buildings in downtown Detroit either didn't know about it at all or sent me to one place that sent me to another, and I got nowhere. So it makes me angry, but at the same time, they started something. They don't know what they started, and we're about to finish it. Dear Mr. Mayor, come talk to us. This neighborhood they consider so bad. Come to the neighborhoods that are the hardest hit. I want to see the city of Detroit take responsibility. We're talking about over 100,000 people that lost their homes. We're not doing this to ourselves. This is not laziness. So I want to see people get help. I want help, but I want to see other people get help.
All right, y'all. Now I want to switch over, and now I want to, we're gonna do a test. Before we do Q&A, I'm gonna see who is actually paying attention. All right? So I'm gonna test you on some of this information. Y'all better get it together. All right? All right, we talked about one of the main things, again, the book is entitled Plundered, How Racist Policies Undermine Black Homeownership in America. I want to make sure when you leave here, you understand what racist policies are. And again, the definition are any policy and practice that causes racial inequity. I mentioned several, right? One of the ones I mentioned was racial covenants. Did anyone pick up what a racial covenant was about? Go ahead, baby, right here on the radio. Speak loudly. Come on, baby, excellent, right? So a racial covenant is literally, they were racial covenants tucked in deeds. And they said that mostly all over the country, black people, but on the West Coast, it was also against Asians. But they said that we could not live in certain places. So while a lot of people think that down south is where all the racism was with the cross burnings and all of that, racial covenants is what was happening in the north and all over the rest of the country, all right? And so what's so crazy, we have these racial covenants which said we couldn't live in certain places, and more importantly, they said that we couldn't live in the suburbs back in the day, and that's where the houses were cheaper, bigger, with better amenities, all right? So racial covenants, you guys got that. Next one, racist policy. I mentioned something called redlining. Go ahead, babe. Redlining. What's redlining? Come on. All right, y'all don't play. I like this high school. All right, excellent. That's exactly right. So you guys, what I need you to understand, again, redlining, the federal government, when there was a black community, they drew a red line around the black community, which meant that banks could not make loans to those communities because they were considered too high of a risk, right? And because of the government redlining, that means that the black community did not have money for home improvement loans, for mortgages. And so what I need you to understand is that the blight that resulted was a result of the federal government policy of redlining. But when people see a community that's a blight, they say, oh, who do they blame? They blame the black people in that community. These racist policies have no shoulders on which to carry the blame. But I need you all to be able to look beyond these, again, what I call narratives of personal responsibility, and tell people about these structural injustices, about these racist policies, like redlining, all right? The last one, you guys were paying attention. Racist policy, I want you guys, I didn't really talk about a blockbuster in the talk, did I? What you remember when I talked about? Yeah. Well, you guys got it. You guys got it. So what I want you to understand is, in the book, I use two grandfathers, one white and one black. And what's so interesting is they both got to Detroit right around the same time, between 1902 and 1906. And they both came to work at the same factory, which was River Rouge Factory, which was one of the Ford's meanest, dirtiest, most dangerous factories, right? And what's so interesting is these two grandfathers, Grandpa Bucci came from Italy, right? And he was a sharecropper in Italy in a system called Mezzadria. And Grandpa Brown was black, and he was a sharecropper in North Carolina. So everything was the same, right? They were both sharecroppers in their place of origin. They come to Detroit both looking for opportunity. They both get to work at the same factory. But what we find out in the book is that their lives diverge, right? Not because of anything having to do with how hard anybody was working, but because of racist policies. So in the book you find Grandpa Bucci, you know, at no point did Grandpa Bucci have it easy. He actually only had 4 fingers on one hand because he lost a finger back when he worked in a coal mine in France before he made it to Detroit. You know, Grandpa Bucci was Italian before Italians became white, right? When Italians faced a lot of discrimination. But although Grandpa Bucci had it hard, at no point did he have to deal with racial covenants that said he couldn't live in the best parts of the city or live in the suburbs where the homes were cheaper, bigger, with better amenities. Grandpa Bucci had a hard life, but at no point did he and his community deal with redlining, which is, as you said, a federal government drawing a red line around the community and preventing investment from coming into the community. Grandpa Bucci had a hard life, but at no point did he deal with another racist policy called blockbusting. And that's because the presence of black people, because of redlining, could reduce home values for a neighborhood. Anytime white people would see black people coming, they would flee. And then these intermediaries would sell the homes to, they would flee, selling at cheap prices. These intermediaries would sell the homes to black people at inflated prices. That was called blockbusting. At no point did Grandpa Bucci have an easy life, but at no point did he have to deal with urban renewal, which is another racist policy I need you all to know about. That's because of the blight created by redlining. They then demolished entire communities, blighted homes, unblighted homes, productive black businesses, black cultural institutions. And they didn't just demolish bricks and mortar, they also demolished the important social capital that kept our community together, where neighbors were like family and disciplining each other's children, etc. And so because of segregation, there were only a limited number of places that black people could go, and when after their communities had been demolished, and so now we have these pockets, these communities where they're communities of strangers. People don't know each other, communities of strangers that are vulnerable to disorder, right? What I've been talking to you about these illegally inflated property taxes, that's another example of a racist policy. So although Grandpa Bucci and Grandpa Brown start the same, they have totally different ending points. Grandpa Bucci's grandson in the book, you'll find out, is Robert Ficano, who was the Wayne County executive, and he still lives in his granddad's house today. And I asked Robert, I said, Robert, why are you living in your granddad's house? He said, why wouldn't I? The note is paid off. Where Grandpa Brown's granddaughter is Myrisha, who you heard me talk about. What Myrisha didn't inherit a valuable asset, she inherited a money pit because of these layers and layers of racist policies. Yet when they look at Grandpa Bucci and Grandpa Brown, this white grandfather and this black grandfather, they say the white grandfather has what he has because he worked hard. I am here to tell you that Grandpa Brown worked hard too. Okay? Grandpa Brown worked hard too. Again, these racist policies are what is, again, this invisible thing doing so much work in terms of how people, the results and how people end up. So that's what I want you to take away from this assembly. That's what I want you to take away from this book, is to be able to tell people, you know, anytime they come at you with something like, oh, what I call narratives of personal irresponsibility. The community looks like it looks like because people don't care, people are lazy, people, all of these, you're gonna stop them and you're gonna be like, no. And you're gonna tell them about racist policies, right? You're gonna tell them about these invisible policies that have been structuring, that have been depleting intergenerational wealth in the Black community, all right? So you guys did great. You guys got 100%. Thank you to these two young gentlemen here. Thank you, young people. Thank you. Excellent. Now I want to open it up for questions from the audience. Go ahead. Yes. 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 Ooh, honey, I love him. Get his name. We need to give him the fellowship. This brother. Oh, we need a mic. Okay, now, next time, I'm sorry y'all missed it. That was fire. Next time, we'll give the next person a mic. But basically the question is, it was excellent. It's about in the Black community, we have, and you're right, in Detroit, which is an 80% Black city, we have some of the highest property taxes in the state of Michigan, but also some of the highest property taxes in the nation, right? But property taxes, as this young brother is pointing out, are what pays for education. Yet the Detroit public schools, although Detroiters are paying high property taxes, the schools in the suburbs are better than the schools in Detroit, right? And that is exactly, that's exactly the issue. So when we talk about, that's exactly the problem. And that's exactly the result. So what I am putting my finger on in the book is the why. Why does that happen? And that happens because, again, of these layers and layers of racist policies, right? That led us to this point where we have high taxes for low services, right? Because of, again, white flight as a result of redlining and all this other stuff I'm telling you about, white flight diminished the property tax base in Detroit. So even though we have higher taxes, it makes less money, right? And so high taxes, but low tax base. And again, what I need you to know is that's a result of these racist policies, which you learned about today. All right, who has the mic next?
Hello. Okay, this thing is on. Hi, my name is Cody. Before I even start, my question is that I was hearing about a lot of these property taxes, and when I get out of high school, I might want to go ahead and buy a house. Now, if I'm going inside of a very diverse area and neighborhood, could they possibly try to raise the property taxes on me over there illegally, or no?
Yeah, excellent. So yes, if you're thinking about home ownership, which you all should be thinking about home ownership, one of the things that the lessons is, there's a lot of things involved in home ownership beyond buying the home, right? And property taxes is one of them. And most people, when they get their property tax bill, they just accept it. And a lot of times, for a lot of the teachers in the room who own their homes, they'll know that their property taxes are paid by their mortgage company. And so they don't even look at their property tax bill at all. And so as a result of this presentation, when you become a homeowner, because you will become a homeowner, right? When you become a homeowner, you know you're gonna look, when that property tax bill comes, you're not just gonna put it to the side, right? You're going to examine it and you're gonna look at that form and you're gonna say, the state or the local government thinks my house is worth X. That's what you're gonna find out in that notice. And if you believe that your house is not worth the amount that the state says, you're gonna file an appeal, right? And so that's how, and a lot of people, again, they don't know any of this. They've never filed an appeal. They don't even know how much the city thinks that their house is worth. But these are the things that we are encouraging through the Coalition for Property Tax Justice. One of the things in the fight back that we do is we actually file these appeals for folks. If you are not a landlord, if you are an owner-occupier, we file the appeal for you for free. And so if you live in Detroit and your mom, your parents, your grandparents, your auntie, your people at your church, your mosque, let them know about our services at the Coalition where we're filing these property tax appeals for people for free. And a lot of times we look at the property tax bill and we're like, you're good. But other times we look at the property tax bill, we're like, they're overtaxing you, we're gonna file the appeal. Either way, we look at it to make sure that you're good. So, again, send them, any homeowners in your life, send them to us so that we can check out their property taxes to make sure that they're good. Excellent question. Next question. All right. Okay.
All right. The question I'm gonna ask isn't essentially different from his, but Timothy Ellen. So the question I'm gonna ask isn't as far as the question he's asking. But I would like to know how badly would things like redlining, blockbusting, and etc. How badly would that affect high school, similar to DEPSA, Cornerstone, maybe even Pershing, this school itself, Harper Woods, and several other schools that are mostly surrounded by black neighborhoods? Like how badly could it possibly affect them?
Yeah, all of these things I need you to understand, they affect the community. High schools are part of communities, and these racist policies, deeply affected our communities, right? So although racial covenants are no longer, there was a case that outlawed racial covenants, but they're no longer legal. But the point is that when your grandparents, if you had grandparents that moved to Detroit and they came to Detroit, again, they could not buy homes in the suburbs. And then those homes are what they then could not pass down those homes to their children, to their grandchildren. So the first thing, racial covenants, part of what the racial covenants is why, that's part of the explanation for why you don't see black people in the suburbs, right? It's not, right, that's part of the reason, is because of racial covenants. When you think about redlining, and this comes to this young king's comment, when you think about redlining, that's part of why the school systems in majority black neighborhoods, right? That's why there's no wealth in those communities, and that lack of wealth transfers into school quality. But why is there a lack of wealth in those communities, right? That's the question we have to ask. And a lot of that has to do with redlining, because these communities the inflow of capital was stymied by this racist policy called redlining, right? So that's part of the reason why the community doesn't have wealth, right? And when you don't have wealth, that's why the schools, are also don't have wealth. So I want you all to understand that although a lot of these policies happened in the past, that history has a long hand, okay? There's ways in which these policies of the past are still relevant and affecting us today. So excellent question. Next question. All right, we have all jumped. Where the sisters at? Where are the sisters? I love these brothers standing up, but where my sisters at? All right, go ahead.
My name is Carlos Ramsey, and my question is, how exactly did you find out about this issue, and what do we need to know about it to look into it ourselves?
Excellent. So, that brings us to thank you, wonderful question. Y'all, we passed out this one pager. I'm gonna tell you what this is about. So basically what we're doing here is, what I need y'all to realize is that, there's a problem with illegally inflated property taxes, but you can do something about it, right? I want you to leave here understanding that there is structural problems, there are structural injustices, but there is something you can do. You have the power to move justice forward. And that's one of the main things I want to leave you with. So that's what we have here. What we have is a coalition, again, this coalition of a dozen grassroots organizations. We basically have what we call our first 100 days plan. And through all of our research and on the ground work, we have 5 different policies that we believe, as you know, we just elected a new mayor in Detroit. The new mayor, Mary Sheffield, her office starts January 1. And we believe we have a plan, this first 100 days plan that you see here, that will really fix property tax injustice in Detroit, okay? And so you can learn more about that. But what can you do is, there's a QR code here. You can get your phone, get the QR code, and sign the petition in support of this first 100 days plan. And what we're going to do is, at the very first city council meeting in January, we're going to take the petition with everyone's name and present it to city council to show that we have overwhelming support for this first 100 days plan. So that's something you can actually do. The other thing you can do is, we're on social media. Follow us on social media, through social media, and we're always communicating, giving you all actions. If this is something that you are so outraged about, follow us on social media and do the actions. And if you, again, do this QR code, you'll become part of our mailing list. And on our mailing list, we always send out actions that use simple actions that you can take, one click, writing a letter, making a phone call, etc. But I want thank you so much for that so important question. I want you guys, when you leave this assembly, again, to know that there are structural injustices, but each one of you has the power to do something about it. All right? And that's the main thing I want to leave you with in this assembly, if nothing else. Any other questions? One more question.
All right, I got one more. This is kind of like a follow-up question for the one that I asked. My name is Carmani Casey. Now, my question, it's about the cycle that we are in, right? So we start off with the property taxes. Property taxes are very high. However, we have very little resources, right? However, in the blonde hair and blue eyes community, they have more resources. They have better education. Now, when the test scores come around, we have standardized, right? The standard that we all must pass, the average, right? However, in the Black communities, we don't have the education, we don't have the resources that would better us and help us pass that average. So how do we break that cycle? Because the blonde hair and blue eyes community, they will have the resources, they will have the education that is needed to pass that average, right? But in our community, we don't really have that. And the standard, once they pass it, they're the brightest, right? They're the best. And we're labeled as the less fortunate, the kind of like special kids. So how do we beat that allegation? How do we break that cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. And great question. And this is exactly the point that my book is trying to put forth here, right? Is what you are calling special, all of these, what you were saying, I call those narratives of personal irresponsibility, right? You're not there because it's your fault. You're not studying harder. You're not. Those are narratives of personal irresponsibility. And what I want to teach you all is that anytime you hear those narratives of personal irresponsibility, whether they show up in the context of school funding, whether they show up in the context of test scores, whether they show up in the context of property tax injustice, I want you all to have the skill set to be able to say, that's a narrative of personal irresponsibility. And what you need to do is do the work of saying, I'm going to lift up the structural injustice. While you're over here talking about it's the fault of some individual because you're not educated, you're not doing this, I'm going to lift up these structural injustices. And that's the work of those of us who love justice. is to change the conversation from these narratives of personal irresponsibility and lift up these racist policies, lift up these structural injustices, right? It's not that we're lazy, it's not that we don't work hard, it's not none of that, right? It's these structural issues that are coming into play. And that's the skill set I want to really give to you all, is this work of identifying narratives of personal irresponsibility and tearing them down and saying, it's these racist policies, it's these structural issues, and changing the conversation in every room that you enter. Okay? All right, I think that was the last question. And I will just, before I close, I would just want to say, you all were amazing. Thank you. These questions were beyond amazing. Thank you for your engagement. And again, do these actions. If you are interested, like we said, we are hiring 5 different high school youth to come and work with us. And how you do that is you'll go ahead and take this action, and then you'll come into our system. So that's how we'll find you. And then we'll send out an email, because you'll then be on our email list once you do this action. And then we'll send out an email letting you know when we are doing the hiring for the high school students. All right? And again, this is a chance. The main thing, the other thing we want to invite you to is our coffee and story space, which is every first Saturday. And again, we'll send you this. Every first Saturday, you can come with your mama, your auntie, your daddy, whoever. Every first Saturday at ECN, Eastside Community Network, from 10:30 to 12, we have something called Coffee and Stories. And so if you are interested in the student worker position, you should try and come to one of the Coffee and Stories, right? So for those of you interested in the student worker position, definitely take the action on the QR code, get on our mailing list, and then next step is trying to come to one of our Coffee and Stories, and then we'll take it from there. We are so looking forward to, again, integrating youth into our movement, because I think it's so important. These issues of property tax affect everyone. Before I leave quickly, how many of you know somebody who has gone through property tax foreclosure? Do you know somebody who has gone through property tax foreclosure? All right? Because again, in Detroit, 1 in 3 homes has completed the property tax foreclosure process. So again, thank you all for your time and attention, and thank you for the kind invitation.
Let us give Dr. Atuahene another round of applause. We are so excited. We are so happy that you spent this time with us today.